special edition of ASIS International, SecurityGuideTV.com, special broadcast. We're starting a new series here on ASIS. It's for the ASIS security experts on the ASIS security councils. And I'm really happy this week to talk with Jeff Sieben of Resolver.com. He's the vice chair of the ASIS International IT Security Council, of which ASIS has several councils, and IT security is one of them. And today we're going to talk about what the Internet's going to look like 5-10 years from now. And I think we're going to find this a really, really interesting conversation and a little bit concerning in one way. So, Jeff, welcome to the show. Glad to have you on.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Now, you're from Resolver, which was formerly PPM 2000, which was formerly IREMS. You guys have been in the business of collecting data and writing reports on the Internet for, since the late 90s, I guess it is. So it's kind of interesting. You're going to have a unique perspective on not the Internet of what your business does, but the data behind it. And that's really fascinating to me. So give me a little bit about your background first so we kind of know what kind of expert we're talking to.
Sure. So I've got a computer engineering background, went to school, computer engineer, started entrepreneurially right out of school, doing some work with in the security industry, doing kind of like the first take of virtualized operation centers and alarm panels. Went to found ASIS, extremely helpful. Did one of the CPP review classes here in Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and met two really great guys. And they said, "Hey, there's this company, PPM 2000. You want to come work for them?" And I've never looked back since then. So that was in 2009. And with at Resolver, we've been sort of collecting data. There was a need to do incident management, just kind of organize security departments and start to keep track of incident-related data, activity-related data, all the things that software solutions can do for security departments. And that was back in 1988, I think it was. We started.
Yeah. The Internet was barely up and running. I think I had a 9K modem. And you had to go to CompuServe to dial in, right? You could do a couple things. So it's come a long ways. Yeah, it's really kind of fascinating how far all this has come. So based on what we know about the current state of technology, the question today, the topic today is, what is the Internet going to look like 5 or 10 years down the line? And this is a very broad question for you, but give us an idea of what you think.
Yeah, if we look back 5 or 10 years ago, the Internet was, in full flow. We already had the dot-com bust. We already, there's just lots of more and more devices had been, added onto the Internet. Nowadays, I think we went through the cloud trust period, I don't know, maybe about 5 years ago. And now that's all people are using is just, lots of data being stored in the cloud. 5 to 10 years from now, I think the Internet could be, a lot more embedded in our own personal daily lives. Nowadays you have thermostats, personally, you have thermostats and you have, precision cookers, even lawnmowers that are connected to the Internet. Smart cars, will be some of that technology that absolutely has to be connected, and along with many other smart devices. But all of that, those devices and data, flying back and forth at high speeds. Will be sort of a very normal thing, and being able to use that to help our life and society and humankind along.
Well, helps one way to describe it. Of course, there's always the downside of it, which could start to impact our life negatively, right? Now, for my nieces and nephews that think a smartphone has been around since Fred Flintstone and don't understand that it's brand new technology, let's describe what the Internet of Things means, IoT. We hear this a lot. We hear it a lot inside the cyber world. Of course, programmers, people like yourself in the business understand that term. Describe for the average person what the Internet of Things means.
So the Internet of Things, of course, the acronym, but it basically is like the collection of all technological devices that are sort of connected up to the internet. Usually, it's these devices that are smaller. So things like watches. Oftentimes they're embedded devices. Watches, it would be like refrigerators nowadays, thermostats, things like that. So that's kind of what we mean when we say Internet of Things. But that, I mean, the set of things is growing and growing and growing, and it's we just, the young people, like you say, your nieces and nephews, they take it for granted nowadays. So that's what that means.
Yeah, and I'm always worried that my Samsung refrigerator is going to get pissed off at me one day because I didn't order cream like it told me to, and then it's going to turn off my meat drawer and ruin all my steaks or something. I mean, it sounds crazy, but on the other hand, your refrigerator is also an access point on the internet, right? And this is what people just don't understand. My thermostat, I have that Nest thermostat. It's great. If it's too hot or too cold in the house, I just, sit in bed, turn it off. Nobody even knows that I was adjusting the thermostat, and I get to freeze my house out. But people, bad guys, can connect to the house through those devices. They can connect through your refrigerator in theory, right? And let's say that you're on the computer at home and you're logging into your work address, and somebody could get in through your refrigerator, get into your computer network at home, and then get into your work address. That's not crazy, right?
It's not that crazy. It's doable, but it becomes exceedingly more and more difficult. I think as enterprise becomes more aware of what security needs are, we just, in the physical security realm, you might talk about putting a fence up or locking your door. Just putting these things in place in the cybersecurity, in the Internet of Things. Those are the things that help, and it makes it hard harder, not impossible, but it makes it a lot harder for criminal-minded people to jump from the internet in the middle of somewhere onto your refrigerator to unlock your door for somebody that's waiting there while you're away at work.
Now, we have all these connected devices and the data required to enable their function, but describe the risk to the average person. I don't think the average person understands that maybe it's not going to be a super duper smart kid down the street that's 14 years old and is a genius that can hack your house. Maybe it's your cyber hygiene, right? Maybe you're not using a good password for your phone. Maybe you're not putting a password in a thermostat. So let's talk about that and how the average person is at risk just based on their own behavior.
Yeah, I think you mentioned passwords. Passwords is a really a good one. I think there's not having a long enough or complex enough password can open up the door to a lot of problems. It would be, if we can liken it to locks on a door, your password is the key that gives you access to your data or things that you're trying to protect, like a lock on the door to your home or your business. You can have complicated keys, and you can have simple keys. And so back in the day, you remember those old, maybe not back in our day, but generations before, they had those, that key, and you'd put it in. There's the keyhole, and people can pick those very easily. Nowadays, it becomes a lot harder to pick a lock, and having a longer password is like having a more complicated key. So that's one of the things that can be done to help protect that. Also, awareness. So if you come from rural, if you live in a rural, or you grew up in a rural area, you probably didn't lock your door because there weren't very many people around. Criminals didn't come and find your farm or whatever it is. So your door would be open. It's just a pain to have to lock it all the time. But I think being aware of the environment is also a significant piece. And these days, like, let's face it, it's really complicated it can be very complicated for of an environment to be aware of all these things. So just being aware and also helping others. Just if you know, helping others get in the know. And sometimes that means, like you say, asking your niece or nephew for help.
Well, now this is interesting about hacking, because when you and I use the term hacking, we understand what that means in a technical sense. But really, very few things are actually hacked. In other words, encryption keys basically cannot be broken. What happens on the internet is somebody leaves that encryption key you just described, the digital key. They leave it in a directory somewhere on the computer. They leave it on the desktop, whatever it is. People find that and unlock all your encryption. But in a general sense, hacking means somebody, pulled a fast one, got into my computer, got into my phone. And to me, the password protection is really the issue, because if you just use, password 01, that's the first thing they check, right? So the password thing is really important to me. What would you recommend kind of a rule for passwords and how you write them?
Yeah, that's a good question. So for me at my organization I work for, they switched the password rules recently. They wanted to make them longer. And so something really simple is maybe a couple words that are separated by a special character. So it could be, Chuck dash Hollywood or Chuck hyphen Hollywood. So like if you put a Chuck hyphen Hollywood 01, that should probably make it very complicated. And like those indicators that you see on screens, that'll make it one of the strong ones. So stringing two words together is a good way. Two simple words. I would and then kind of mixing it up, putting the numbers in front if you can, throwing a capital in there. Yep, those are some real easy ways. And if you need it to be really long, like ours is, you could type out a sentence, which is 3 or 4 words together.
Yeah, and I use acronyms. So I'll use the first letters to spell a sentence in my head that I can never forget, and put combinations of numbers in there. Remember the Apple hack last year? A big deal that the Apple. It turns out that the Apple phones weren't really hacked. They just had a database that ran a series of words, and were able to crack, I forgot what the number was, 25% of the Apple phones, 50%, whatever it is, because people literally put password, Fido, sunshine.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Well, yeah, common words. And the computer, the bad guys didn't really hack that. They just actually entered a password that was real. That's different than getting your encryption key and stuff. So anyway, it's pretty simple. Cyber hygiene stuff is simple, but the average person, I think, doesn't get that. So I'm glad the council's working on that kind of education. Now, let's shift to businesses. What are the risks for a business, and what should they do about those risks? Because the average small business, in the United States is what, 5 or 6 employees, but they comprise 90% of the businesses in America. Big corporations are a small percentage of the total number of businesses. And of course, they have a giant toolbox of cybersecurity things they can use to defend themselves. What's the average business do? You got multiple users. You have people bringing their own devices to work and using it for business. A really big challenge for small business.
Yeah, I think if you mentioned 5 to 6 people in a small organization. I think being aware. You're somebody. Even the group of business owners or employees that are small. Being aware of the sort of like these, we call them attack vectors. So people can come in through places like your firewall. If you're using a home router and you're really doing sort of startup mode, being able to just using devices that are a little more known out there. I think some of the other awareness pieces are related, not just sort of the network side of things, but having a passcode on your phone to protect it. Even a 4-digit code, it really helps. And businesses is protecting against sort of like data leakage. There's things like reputation that they, if you are a small business and you want to get big, and your reputation, you get hacked and it gets out there, all of a sudden you're your business kind of just falls off the cliff because of trust issues. So trust issues is a big thing these days, and I think awareness is one of the big things that we can battle. I used to battle some of these things.
The North Koreans. I just read this article today. It really it disturbed me, and I knew this stuff was going on, but I didn't know what was going on to this degree. And what I read was that they're into stealing money out of banks now, cyber theft, and they tried to attack the Federal Reserve, and they almost got away with $1 billion. And somebody by chance caught them or did something that were luckily able to stop them. But I think they eventually got away with 80 million or something like that, a huge amount of money. But to the Fed, that's a small amount of money. And they're doing this around the world. They're attacking major financial institutions and just stealing the money because of poor cyber protection or security or something like that. Do we think the average person is at risk for this sort of thing? Well, let me take that back. Let me restate that. I don't think the average person is at risk individually, but certainly if your financial institution gets hacked and all the money gets stolen, that's going to be a problem for your bank account, right? So what are we doing in the industry to look at those state-sponsored attacks? How do we, as the average person, guard against that if we can?
Yeah, truly, I don't think that an individual can really protect against that. On a state level, our nation. Nations need to protect against that, and when you have industrial hacking, strategy from one country to another, and I don't think any of that is strange these days. But that governments really need to sort of up their game and help organizations like the Federal Reserve. It's not just one guy or gal that is setting up firewall rules. Like it's a very organized. I think so. I don't think that the average person can really help with that. But what they can do is, as an example, just have an emergency fund of cash maybe at home. In case so the bank has to go through some, and this is definitely not in the foreseeable future, but if a bank has to they don't know where an attack is coming from, and they have to lock things up for a couple hours or a day or two, and you need to get some cash out, just having a little bit of cash at home may help. And that's not meant to scare anybody. That's just maybe good practice.
Yeah, I think it's a good idea, and that's another reason I don't buy Bitcoin. Just in case, because if
no kidding,
the internet
yeah.
goes down, there goes your Bitcoin. That's the average. You're going to suffer a huge loss on that kind of thing. Give us a kind of a wrap up of where you think the internet might be. Are we going to be wearing? Is everybody going to have Google glasses? Is it going to be hardwired in our head? I mean, what's a really a crazy prediction you might think about involving robots and things like that? There's all kinds of possible scenarios, but what's out there? What are people working on?
Well, the imagination can go wild, on this stuff. And I think we're speeding up the velocity to technology, and some of these cool things is really speeding up. Probably, I don't know, wild stuff out there. I would think, the self-driving cars is almost upon us. Being able to have that along with other things that technology can be used for, things like lawnmowers or being put into embedded devices like really like a fridge or a lawnmower, or even using that for like HVAC systems. I can probably see the day when some of the white collar work will be taken over by artificial intelligence type of thinking. I know Elon Musk and Bill Gates and others have really kind of bound together to try and get under sort of like the ethical stuff that topics that come with AI. But it's that kind of thing is coming, and alongside, all of this as we progress in humanity, there's always cyber criminals, and it's not the technology's fault. Even though it can be an enabler and it can be exploited, it's sort of that underlying human element of badness or evil that's there. And I think, I would say, raising good, solid families and doing our best to try and keep families, and aware of people and communities, and trying to move humanity forward in a good way, not an evil way. But yeah, those AI it's coming, and it's we just got to guide it.
I like your comments about the family, because that's the core to keep everything solid and make wise decisions based on people, not things. The AI is here, in my mind. It's in the infancy. I had the honor to sit on a robotics panel at ASIS last month at the annual seminar, and we're talking about this sort of thing, right? So there's about 1 million security guards in the United States, and there's about a million people that they cannot hire in the cyber world. There's not enough bodies to hire them, right? There's no qualified people. It's a zero unemployment in the cybersecurity world. But for the last 10 years, nobody's thought to train these guards to learn cyber techniques, cyber rules. I mean, when I ran guard businesses, half of them didn't even have a cell phone, and the other half that had them couldn't even work them, right? It's a huge technology gap, right? And here in the middle, we have robots coming in, and robots are starting to displace, I'm not going to say replace, because displace is where it is now, guards, human beings, right? And nobody thought, hey, maybe we should train these 1 million people over here to operate this stuff. So my concern would be, if robots totally replaced in the security industry, let's just focus on that, all the people in the security business, what are they going to go do for a living? Are they going to flip pancakes at IHOP? I mean, it's kind of an entry-level job in one ways. And, if you eliminate that job, where do those people go? So this is my ethical concern in the business, although robots are far more efficient in many, many ways and get a lot more done. So I hear you on that part. I think it's something we have to go cautiously forward on. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Being together. I mean, people are what make up this planet, along with other animals and everything. But, we have to, we've got to live with people. It's not just sort of, these days, it's not just, me in Canada and you in America. I mean, there are people around the world, and, like guards are focusing on the security industry. People, have to survive. Like, we go back to that Maslow's hierarchy of needs. They need to eat, they need to have shelter, they need to have clothing. Next up, they got to be loved. And I think, this may sound a little bit weird, but adding a little bit of love, to sort of like that frontline security guard forces, kind of goes a long way. And, maybe they are displaced by robots, because robots are, they can't die. You can replace them. People, alternatively can get hurt and that kind of thing. But it's we all have to live together somehow on this planet. And man, to get along is just sometimes really difficult. But I'm hopeful. That we can.
I don't think that sounds weird at all, Jeff. In fact, my theory is the root of almost all violence against others is alienation and the lack of affection. You don't really see active shooters being, hugging type of people or having groups behind them or family support. So I agree with you on that part. We do have to keep this as a human element to make it work. Wise words from Canada. Every time I go to a show, I'm not exaggerating, I walk around and say, that's an interesting product. And look at that product over there. It turns out that 80% of them are from Canada. I don't know what you guys are doing up there, but you're doing something right for sure, because the most innovative stuff comes from Canada, maybe because you have a lot of time in the snow to sit there and think about things. But a lot of innovation coming out of Canada. And Jeff, been a fascinating conversation. Jeff Sieben from Resolver.com, Vice Chair of ASIS International IT Security Council. Thanks for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, happy.
All right, we'll see you guys next time for another ASIS Security Council update here on SecurityGuideTV.com. Thanks.